this piece of Marketplace for 20 bucks, so pretty much a steal. It does need a little bit of repairs, so we have some missing glass over here, a couple of holes and bits that have fallen off, so I'm gonna have to get that all sorted. But first of all, we need to clean the piece. So as you can see, this must have sat in storage for the longest time ever because it is so dusty, like so dusty. So I'm gonna get all the dust off, give it a good wipe, and I'm probably just gonna leave this sit overnight to make sure it's fully dry because we're gonna have to get in there and really give it a good clean. But that is the most important step before you get started on any refurbishing. You need to clean your piece. It's very important to make sure that your paint sticks and lasts. So I got a little distracted when I was cleaning and decided to take the doors off. The hinges were pretty hard to actually unscrew because the screws that were in there were pretty old and rusted in. So it took me a little while to get them off, but I got them off in the end. So back to cleaning now. I've just filled up a little bucket of some water, some soapy water, and I'm just giving the whole piece a really good thorough clean, just trying to get all the dust off, all the dirt off. And look, I'm probably going to have to come in another couple of times and give it another wipe down before we get painting. So I'm almost finished round one of cleaning. I'm going to give it a scuff sand anyway and sand the top, so it's going to get messy again, but just wanted to get it nice and clean to start with. So now I'm going to go ahead and scuff sand the whole piece, and I'm undecided as to whether I'm going to fully sand and stain the top or just paint over the top. So I'm just kind of giving a bit of a sand, see how I feel, and go from there. So here I'm just removing the hardware, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to the drawers. So I decided that I'm going to sand the top. So here you can see I've just started sanding off some of the varnish, and the wood underneath looks really nice. For the sanding, I'm just using my orbital sander, and I've got about an 80 grit here. Alright, so I finished sanding. I've completely sanded the top and given everything else a light buffing kind of sand. And now I've just finished giving the whole thing a really good wipe down. I had to wipe it 3 times to get all the dust off, and then wipe it again to get all the residue off. So I'm going to let that dry overnight, and tomorrow I'm going to come in and we can start painting. Right, so I'm just getting my primer ready, and I'm using the Dixie Belle Boss. And I've just mixed in some of my grey paint in with the mixture just to make it a little bit darker. because I am using a dark paint on top, so I just kind of want a darker undercoat because it'll just look a bit better. So just choose your colour, you can just mix it in, just going to stir it around, and I am going to use a roller to apply it. Alright, so the first coat is on and it's just drying. Now the first coat, you just want to do a thin layer and build up from there. So look, your first layer is going to look pretty streaky. Don't worry about it. You just want to get good coverage and cover every area that you are going to paint. We're going to let this dry. Recommended drying time is 2 hours, so I'm going to probably leave it 3 just to be safe because it is a little bit of a damp day. And then we'll come back for our second coat. Now you'll notice I didn't tape these ones off. Look, I just painted them, and if you get it straight away with the damp cloth, you can wipe the chalk paint right off the glass. So as you can see, I've done that and it's come up pretty clear and you wouldn't even know that I had gone over the edges. So I'm just going to let these dry, as I said, for a few hours, and then we'll go back in with the second coat. So when the paint dried, I went back in with a second and a third coat to achieve full coverage, which you can see here. Now that it's fully dry, I'm going to go over the whole piece with some furniture wax, and that's just going to seal in and protect your piece. So for the wax, I'm using the Traditionals Pete's Polish. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. I just got it from Mitre 10, which is just my local store, so I'm not sure how readily available it is elsewhere, but have a look. There's a few other different products on the market which you can use and do this exact same thing. To apply it, I'm just using a microfiber cloth, and I'm just sort of liberally applying it everywhere that I have my paint and I want it to be protected, and then just going back over it to make sure that it's not streaky and it's evenly pushed in. You can sort of let it sit a bit and go back over it and give it a proper buff, but I'm kind of doing that as I go. And you can see it's just slightly darkening the paint, just gives it that nice, rich, deep blue and just looks amazing. Remember when I said I wasn't sure if I was going to paint or stain the top of this piece? I was leaning towards painting it initially, but after sanding it, the wood just looks so nice, it'd be a shame to cover it up, and I've decided to stain it. It is a bit of a pain in the butt because, as you can see, I have already painted and waxed the piece, so not ideal, but look, it can be done. I got the boys' help to flip it over on its top. I used my mouse sander just to give me a head start and sand all the edges. And I'm hand sanding the rest using a piece of cardboard held flush against the cabinet so that I don't damage what I've painted already. Next up, I'm going to stain the top of the cabinet, pop the doors back on, and I've given this a good wipe down so it's all ready for its stain. For the stain, I'm using a stain and varnish. It's by Cabbots and it's the water-based Walnut gloss. I've chosen that colour just because we've got some pieces upstairs that I've done and I've used the same stain on it so it will match and goes really nicely with everything else we have. To apply it, just using these sponge applicator brushes. Now these are a few bucks from Bunnings. I've seen them in other hardware stores as well, so pretty easy to find. They're only a few bucks, like I said, and look, if you wash them and look after them carefully, you can get a couple of applications out of them, so really handy to have. A few different sizes as well, so it just depends how big your surface is. I'm going to use the biggest that I can because it will give me the most amount of coverage and have to do it in the least amount of time. Alright, so here's a bit of a close-up so you can see. So that's just the first coat. I'm going to let that fully dry, give it a light sand, and then I'm going to go over it a couple more times. But already you can see that it's making a huge difference to the overall look of the piece, and this wood looks just beautiful under there. As you can see, all the different wood tones really showing through with that varnish, so really happy with the look so far. Alright, so next up I'm going to use some gilding wax, and I have got, it's like, what is it? Chocolate bronze gilding polish. Okay, so I've never used this before. I've seen it done on videos millions of times, so I thought I'd get some and give it a crack for myself. Now I did clean up the hardware. Sorry, the lighting is terrible. Alright, how's that? Sorry, the lighting isn't too much better over here, but this is the original pieces. I did clean them up and they have come up pretty good, but I just wanted to give this gilding wax a go. I've had a little tester of it and I think it looks pretty good, so I'm just going to go for it. I'm just using a paintbrush to apply it. Just got this random one here from Monarch. This was again just from Bunnings, and we're just going to paint it on and let it sit. So this is what it looks like inside. It's like a metallic bronze in color. So as you can see, it's almost the same color as the item itself. So that's why I didn't think it was going to take away too much from it, but it'll just make it look a little neater, a little more finished. So I've just used some of the gilding wax on the locks. So I've just used the brush and the leftover gilding wax that was on the brush from doing the handles. I've just lightly brushed on here, and it's given it a really nice light dusting of that metallic bronze. So I'm really liking that. So I've gone and done it to the other side as well. Once the hardware dries, we'll pop it all on and see how she looks. Alright, so I've decided to paint the locks that are on the doors in the gilding wax as well, just so it all kind of matches. So I've just taped off the area so that I don't get it over my piece, and I'm just going to go over with the same brush and the gilding wax. So next up, I'm going to attach the hardware. This is the original hardware that came with it, so I've just put some gilding wax on it, as you saw before. So first of all, they were originally just nailed in. So these holes are the existing holes, and they actually don't go all the way through. So because it's for me and I don't plan on taking these off anytime soon, I'm just going to screw them in. So I've just got some screws that fit perfectly in here, like so. And I'm just going to drill them in. As you can see, it is a slightly different color. Look, that's totally fine, because once they're in, I'm just going to paint over them with some of the gilding polish that I already used on the rest, and it will match just fine. So I've just found a drill bit, and that fits perfectly into my screw. There's already pre-drilled holes in there, and so I'm just going to go ahead and attach the hardware now. Okay, so it's the next day, And the top is all dry and the hardware is all on, so you can have a good look and see what it looks like there. I tried to take a video last night, but it was just too dark by the end of everything. So look, here it is in the morning. I've got the hardware all on, the wax is all dry, and this is what the top looks like after 2 coats of the stain and the varnish. Okay, it's come up really nice and highlighted all those different shades of wood. I'm going to sand that a little bit and put on a 3rd coat, and then we are going to start working on these windows. So keep watching to see how I replace them. Alright, so next up I am going to cut a shelf for the cabinet, and also I noticed that there's this one little bit of wood missing on the frame, so I've got some wood which I'm going to cut to size and put in there. All the others are totally fine, but I need 2 shelves and that, so I'm going to go ahead, measure up what I need and get cutting. Alright, so to cut my piece, I've just got this cutting block. It's already got some angles marked on it, and simply just grab your saw, put it into the slot that you want and slide your wood in the middle here. So I've already done that. I had it on the 45 and I've cut my piece, and now I've got it the exact cut that I need to slot it in place. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm just going to measure how long I need it, cut it away, and then we can pop it on. Alright, so I've just marked where I'm going to cut, and I'm just going to pop it in here, match it up to the angle that I need, chuck my saw in and cut away. And just like that, we've got our piece. Alright, so there's my piece cut to size. It fits perfectly in there. I'm actually going to paint it first, let it dry, and then nail it in, because I've already done the whole piece and it's already waxed, even though it looks a little bit dirty. It was kind of an afterthought. I didn't actually notice the missing piece until I'd completely done it. I was going to leave it, and then I thought, look, no, I want to do it properly, so I've got that piece all ready to go. So we'll get that painted. Once that's dry, we'll pop it back in. Alright, so now I'm going to put a 3rd coat of the varnish on. So I'm just going to sand it smooth with a fine sanding pad. And we're going to go over the whole top, and that's just going to give it something a little bit better to adhere to, and also help me get out some of the little blemishes that I've noticed. We'll pop her on, and that'll be it. I'm going to put a top coat on this as well, because it will be a high wear area, and I want it to be nice and tough and withstand time. Next up, I'm going to cut out the shelving. So it did come with 1 shelf and the other one was missing. So I'm just going to use the existing shelf as a template. Now I've tested it in both sides and it's exactly the same. So as long as I cut it to size, it should fit. I've got a big piece of wood just because I'm going to cut out the 2 shelves to make sure that they match, even though I already have one which I could reuse, but just to save me some time sanding and to make sure that the wood looks similar, I'm just going to cut out 2 exactly the same and use it as is. And this can just be scrap wood that I'll use on another project down the road. And just to double check, I did try the shelf in both sides, so it definitely fits. And look, they obviously just guesstimated when they were doing these shelves. It looks handmade, and some of these are a little bit bigger than they need to be, so I'm just marked out exactly where I want the cuts to be, just to make it a little bit of a tighter fit, and I should have some good looking shelves. So that didn't quite work as well as I was hoping. There's not enough wood showing through to the other side to nail it in, so I have just glued it in. The glue will be fine, and when I did that I was just a little bit messy, so I had to try and clean that up, and I've accidentally chipped a bit of paint with the hammer. So look, that's all good. I'm gonna clean that off, let it dry, we'll repaint it, and it'll be fine. All right, to fix these areas that I accidentally ruined, I'm just gonna clean it with some steel wool first, because I have already waxed this piece. So you gotta scuff it up, make sure that you get all the wax off. So I've first of all started with really fine steel wool around the area that I'm gonna repaint. Then I'm gonna go wipe over it with some mineral spirits. And then we're gonna get that nice and dry, and then we should be all good to paint over it. So look, if you make a mistake, these things happen. You just gotta grit with it and fix it up. So it just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, but anything that you do can be fixed, okay? So let's go ahead and fix this one up. While I leave that for a bit, I'm going to go over and stain my shelves. So I'm just using the same stain that I used on the top on the shelves, and also using the same applicator brush to apply it as well. I've just emptied the stain into a bigger tin, just is easier for me to dip my brush in whilst I go along and do the stain. Okay, so I've varnished the first coat on the shelves. Just gonna let them sit and dry for a couple of hours, and then we'll go in. I'm gonna do 3 coats on these guys as well, just because they will be highway areas with all the bottles, liquor bottles that we'll be putting on them. So just let them fully dry, give them a sand, and keep going. Alright, so I've just added on a stick and style stencil for the shelves here. I'm just going to do a skinny strip along the front, just to add a little bit of detail. I've coloured the front strip that you would see as you open the door with the same colour navy that I've been using on the whole piece. Then I've chosen this little stencil to do just a little detail edging on the front end. So I really loved how the stencil looked, so I wanted to do some stenciling on the sides of the drawers as well. So I'm just using the same stencil for this. I've given it a really good clean and just reattached it to the side of the drawers where I want the stenciling, and just lightly dabbing on my paint. So the key here is to have only a small amount of paint on your brush, and have like a little rag or something handy so you can dab off the excess as you go along your stencil. Okay, so next up, it's time to replace those missing panes of glass. Now, I've never cut any glass before, so this was quite a task. As you can see here, I have numerous attempts at trying to cut it and get it right, but it just keeps breaking. For this, initially I used just some glass out of some photo frames which I bought from like Kmart or Big W, but they were just not working and they just kept breaking. I think I went through like 6 different frames. So I tried a few different methods, different pressures that I put on the glass, different ways in which we broke it, but it was still just coming up with a really rough edge or breaking like corners off and just not being straight at all. So all of these were just unusable. So I thought I'd give it a break after I used up all this glass, and would see if we can get maybe a bit better glass from the wreckers down the road. So my roommate goes along and does that for me, and we'll come back in tomorrow and you'll see how that one goes. I almost forgot, this is the glass cutting tool that I use. It's just Trojan from Bunnings, I think I picked it up. It's just got some little wheels on the end, and you just slide it down your glass wherever you want to cut. So here I am the next day. So I've got a slightly thicker piece of glass and I'm just working on top of a much sturdier surface. So I've just moved downstairs on top of a coffee table and I'm just marking everything out as I did the other day. And I found that this time that I used a fair bit more pressure with the glass cutting tool, and I could hear that scoring sound. So any of the YouTube videos I watched, they said that you'll hear like a crackling kind of noise as you score the glass. So I definitely heard that this time. And then my first one wasn't so straight, so I mark them out again, and I'm using some wood on either side of the glass as I'm breaking it to disperse my weight a little bit more, and I found this worked really well and I ended up getting some really nice clean lines. So after I changed up my technique a little bit and got a better piece of glass, I was able to get 3 perfect pieces of glass for the cabinet. I tried them straight away once I was done to make sure they fit, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to recut them, and they fit perfectly. So look, just watch me finish off cutting all the glasses here and then we'll move on to popping them into the cabinet. So it's nearly the end of the day, so I thought I'd just pop on my top coat on the shelves and the top of the cabinet, because that's all done. And if I do it now, then that way it'll dry overnight and be ready for me in the morning. I'm just using the Cabbots clear water-based top coat as I always do, and using the same applicator sponge as well to apply it. Right, so next up we're going to insert the glass. So the instructions say to just clean it with some mineral terps, make sure you've got some soapy water on hand, and also some terps as well. So I've got those 2 containers full of the water and the terps. I've got a clean microfiber cloth ready to go. I've already wiped down my glass and now I'm just preparing my sealant to pop it all in place. Right, so here we're just popping on the sealant, just going section at a time. And I've got a little tool, as you can see there, which helps just get a nice clean edge. You can also just use your finger, just make sure you wet it first, because it'll just make it slide along there a lot easier. So you might have noticed I got an extra set of hands there. I asked my partner if he could assist me with this one, just because I'd never used this before, and I wanted to make sure that it was done correctly and looked nice as well. So he just went along with the sealant, and I followed along, cleaning up the edges with my finger or the tool that I mentioned before. Once I was pretty confident with how the whole thing worked, I thought I would do the inside one myself. That turned out really good. And yeah, all there is left to do after this is just to let it sit and set, and this whole piece is done and ready to come upstairs in its new spot.